Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Christina, and welcome to the Career Development Center's Mind Your Manners event. We are really glad to have you here with us tonight. We will be delving into some techniques that foster a successful dining experience for you, both personally and professionally. Joining us today is Dr. Nikki Davis, who is a Hospitality, Tourism, and Event Management Program Director here at SIU, Professor of Practice, food writer for the Southern Illinoisan, and founder of Rooted in Foods. We ask that if you have any questions during this event, to please drop them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So without any further ado, let's get started. Take it away, Dr. Davis.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Typically, we are live and in a dining room to do this event with a real place setting in front of everyone and food on the table in front of us too. But with the pandemic, we are virtual, so I'm glad that we were able to put something together for you to help teach some basic table manners um, in a little bit of business etiquette maybe tonight, but make sure you catch us next Tuesday night where we will delve into business and professional etiquette along with some virtual etiquette too that I think everybody probably needs as we're emerging from the virtual world of our pandemic. So as Christina said, I am the program director for the Hospitality, Tourism, and Event Management degree program here on campus. I've been on campus for almost 20 years and have been doing etiquette dinners for SIU Career Development Center. Not quite that many years, but I'm probably maybe a decade in at this point. So again, thank you for joining us virtually. I know that with virtual classes and a lot of other virtual Zoom events, it can be a little tiring. So I'm glad that you're all here with us tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the different places where you might find um, table setups that might be a little bit different than what you're used to at home. So we'll go through just a handful of photographs that are in business settings, professional settings, and regardless of what major you are in or what area, what field you are in, very good likelihood that at some point in the future and in your career, you will end up at a convention or a conference. And that's the photo that you have in front of you is a large meal function at a trade convention. And at some point you will end up in a setting like this. Now, you also might end up in a setting where you're sitting around a small table in a small dining room in a restaurant with prospective employers sitting across the table from you. So for those two very good reasons, it's important to understand and know your forks, as my mother would have said, um, and all of the different pieces of flatware and glasses and napkins and all the things on the table in front of you. So next photo, please. I have a driver in the computer seat sitting next to me. So this photo is kind of a typical table setup that you would find at a convention or at a conference or just an awards banquet. Even if you go to someone's wedding, this might be something that you'll sit down to. And this is pretty standard. What you are missing in front of you is the dinner plate, of course, in this scenario, but you have 2 forks, knife, spoon, coffee cup, and I'm kind of looking to the side here so I can see the photo. Water glass, napkin, and this is kind of a standard setup. And this is the setup we're going to work through tonight and talk about a little bit. This is also something that you will see at a convention or a conference situation. And very similar to the previous photo, what you have here that's a little bit different is food already preset on the table. And we'll talk about what to do when you walk into the conference, banquet hall conference room and sit down at the table. We'll talk about all the rules and all the things that you need to do when you do sit down there and start to eat. A little bit closer view of what one of those tables will look like. And I love this photo because there's cheesecake sitting there for dessert. And that's always one of my favorite things to see. You can also tell there that you have a spoon that's a little bit longer. And that is a teaspoon. That's not something that we'll talk about much tonight, but kind of put in your memory banks how long that spoon is in comparison to the dinner knife that it's sitting next to. I don't see teaspoons very frequently. Suffice it to say, you will see them sometimes. All right, another photo, just as an example, this is of a buffet setup that you might run into as you're out, moving out into your careers and starting to do some professional events and attending conferences and meetings and whatnot. We're not going to talk a lot about the buffet table scenario tonight. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. Typically, in this kind of a setting, and I suspect everybody's been through a buffet line at some point, but typically in this kind of setting, your table is actually very bare because you're picking up your plate. Chances are you're picking up your flatware and your napkin and everything from that buffet table and going to sit down at a relatively bare round table to eat. And just another view. I love this photo because it's very different than what we should be seeing in a traditional setup, in that the fork and knife are together and there is no spoon. I almost never see a setup with no spoon. And this is one where it can be very confusing if you sat down at this table to know which set of flatware and which napkin is yours. Is it on the right? Is it on the left? So we'll talk about some of the ways to avoid those confusing elements of dining etiquette. All right, so let's get started. On the screen in front of you is a standard table setting. And this is very common, and this is what you will most likely see when you go into a professional dining situation, specifically at meetings and conventions, conferences, other banquets, other special events. This is pretty typical and pretty standard. So what we will do tonight is I'm going to walk through each one of these pieces and talk about what they are, when they're used, how they're used, and give you some tips and tricks. Now, I have some extra things on the place setting in front of me simply because we are not together. We're not at a full table with 7 other people with a meal in front of you. So I do have some extra pieces that I'll talk about as we go as well. Okay, so when we walk into a banquet hall or walk into a restaurant where we have, we're sitting down with a prospective employer, possibly at an interview situation, you want to do a couple of things first. As soon as you are seated, you want to take your napkin, unfold it, and if anybody cares at the end or wants to know at the end of this, I'll show you guys how to fold these. I folded many in my career, but you want to take your napkin, unfold it to about halfway, and immediately set it in your lap, which is not something you guys can see on camera right now. But you want to do that immediately. And there is one simple reason that movement alone signals your wait staff that you are ready to be served. So when you sit down in a restaurant and you make that motion, then the server knows that he or she can come over, in that scenario, take your order and kind of get the meal started. In a banquet situation at a convention, that motion also signals to your server that you are ready to be served the first course. Now, if you've got salad preset in front of you, like in some of the photographs that we saw with that salad there, you can go ahead and start eating as soon as you sit down in that setting, just because people are kind of coming and going at their leisure a little bit in the meeting setting. If you were at a banquet where everybody is entering at the same time, you want to wait until everybody is seated to, oh, sorry. I'm getting hand signals to the right of me here. You want to make sure everybody that is seated around you is served first before you start eating. So a couple of tips there, but your napkin plays a very important role in giving signals to your servers. So once that is in your lap, then you can kind of get the meal started at that point. So I'm going to kind of walk through the different pieces that are on the table in front of me, just so you understand what's what and what's used for which thing. And then again, happy to answer questions about any of this or other questions you might have. Okay, so on the left, we have our forks. And I have in front of me, again, traditional kind of standard place setting, a salad fork and a dinner fork. And when you are served courses in a meal, you will have either soup or salad come out first. Typically in a professional event setting, I see salad. I don't see soup very frequently. Not to say it won't happen, but typically I see salad. So that salad's going to come out first, and it's going to come out on a plate that's a little bit smaller than the dinner plate. So I have a salad plate and a dinner plate. This will either be sitting there or be served to you. And then you have a dinner fork. So the difference between the two, and I hope you guys can see this well enough on camera, salad fork and dinner fork, there's a definite size difference there. The tines, these are the tines of the fork, of the salad fork, are much shorter. And in the flatware that I'm using, the outside tines are actually a little bit thicker. I'm trying to get that close enough for you guys to see. A little bit thicker here and on this side as well. And the reason they are a little bit thicker is to allow you to cut through things like lettuce leaves and cucumbers. It gives it a little bit more weight there. Not all salad forks are created equal, however, so you may not see that. But typically you're going to see a size difference. Now, if you have two forks sitting side by side and they're both the same size, that means that the venue or the caterer is using two dinner forks in lieu of a salad fork and a dinner fork. And just always remember that you're going to start on the outside with your utensils and work your way in. So whichever course is served to you first, you're going to start out on the outside, use that one, and kind of work your way in, and we'll talk about that. So again, this is the salad plate, much smaller than a standard 9-inch dinner plate. This will either be sitting with salad in it when you sit down at the table, or it will be served to you. Now, when you are finished, I'm going to do my best to kind of walk through the courses for you guys, even without courses in front of us. When you are finished, you're going to place your fork upside down onto the plate. And just like with our napkin, that is a signal to your server that you are finished with your salad, even if there's still food on the plate. And they will come and they will take it away from the left side. When food is served to you, or when your drinks are refilled, everything comes from the right side. When it's taken away, it leaves from the left side. So kind of remember that movement so things don't throw you off and as you're getting served your food. So this is going to go away for now. I don't have a lot of space in my little space here. So our next piece of flatware that we'll talk about is the soup spoon. What I don't have is a soup bowl, so I'm going to improvise here real fast. One thing I neglected to pull out of the pantry today. Okay, so we'll pretend that this is our soup bowl here. Soup's going to come out in either a soup bowl that's not oblong and to be round, or it might come out in a soup mug that has a handle like a coffee mug. So when it comes out in a soup bowl, the bowl needs to remain where it's at. You don't pick it up and drink out of it like we might at home. And your soup spoon, which is a different size than our dinner spoon, the bowl of the soup spoon is significantly larger. So that's how you tell the difference there. When you eat soup, you're going to scoop the liquid away from you, which is probably very different than what you're used to doing at home, and that's fine. This might take some practice, and if we were together, I would have you practice this right now. But the reason we do that is because if you spill, you want that spill to go away from you and not towards you to get on your clothing. So very important lesson there. When you are finished with your soup, you will just lay your soup spoon upside down. Again, signal to the server that they can come remove your soup bowl. Now, I told you can't pick your soup bowl up and drink from it. If you're served soup in a coffee mug or in a soup mug that has a handle, that you can pick up and drink from. So make sure you remember the difference there. I don't very frequently see the coffee mug kind of situation But again, it does happen. Thank you. My server is removing things from the left. All right, so we'll get rid of those two pieces. I'll take that back. Thank you. This is the fun of doing virtual etiquette from your living room, from your dining room. Now my server's serving from the right. Thank you. All right, so now in front of me, I have a bread basket. And I have just put one piece of bread in here for this evening to kind of talk you through what happens. The bread basket might be served and it might be sitting on the table in front of you when you sit down. Whoever is closest to the bread basket, if you've got 6 or 8 or 10 people sitting around the table, whoever is closest to the bread basket will be the person to start the bread basket around the table. And what you will do, if you're closest, you will pick that up. You will offer a piece of bread to the person sitting to your right, manners and courtesy. And then you will take a piece if you want it. And if you don't, that's fine. You just kind of keep things moving along. And then you pass it to the person to the left, and it then just goes around the table and finally back to its home. You might also have butter in a little dish or on a plate or something. So this will also get passed, and you will use your butter knife, which is this here. Sorry, I'm reaching. And this is your bread and butter plate. So you will use this a little bit more delicately than what I'm doing to take butter, put it on the edge of your bread and butter plate, and set it down. And then that will move along. You'll have a piece of bread also on your bread and butter plate. And then that bread basket just keeps moving. Now, typically, you're not going to see a French baguette like what I have. This just happened to be what I have in the house tonight. So you'll have a dinner roll here instead. But what you will do, kind of move things around a little bit. When you eat bread, you want to make sure you tear a piece off, and especially if it's French bread, because this is very chewy. You want to tear a bite off. It's a rather large bite, a bite-sized bite off. Take butter it, and then eat at that point. And then just you keep doing that until your bread is finished or you're finished with your bread. Now, again, always reasons why we do things. If any of you have bit into a sandwich and you've got bread crumbles that just kind of fall all down the front of you, that's why we don't bite into dinner rolls like that, because you'll likely get those breadcrumbs that just kind of hit your chest and hit your shirt. Tearing a piece off kind of over the plate and buttering and taking a bite at a time prevents that mess from happening. So we're just going to leave that right there, and we'll have that with dinner later on. All right, moving the butter out of the way. All right, so with the bread, you will have bread available to you probably from the salad course all the way through to dessert. So as you want more bread, feel free to ask for that. And when we ask for something that's across the table from us or too far away for us to reach, we just simply ask the person closest to that item to hand it, to pass it around. But again, at the same situation, if you're being asked to pass the bread basket around the second time, this time just pick it up and go ahead and pass it to the person who's requesting it. Okay, salt and pepper. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So when you have salt and pepper on the table, it's not going to be sitting quite so close to your table setting. It'll be somewhere towards the center of the table. But we treat salt and pepper like they are happily married or twins attached at the hip or BFFs or whatever you want to call them. They stay together when they're passed. So if someone asks for the salt, you pick them both up and you pass salt and pepper together. Likewise, if they ask for the pepper, pick them both up and you pass them together. Now, the reason we do that and keep them together is as they are moving around the table, chances are somebody else is going to want to use them also. Once they reach the person that has requested them, they'll be sent back around the table, or should be sent back around the table, and people will use them as they go around. So we keep them together. One of Nikki's tips for the evening: don't salt and pepper your food or season your food until you have tasted it. Even in a large banquet setting where there are a lot of people and the chef will never know that you've done it, because it's actually not considerate towards the chef or to the people who have prepared that food because you don't know what it tastes like. There could be plenty of salt and pepper in it. So make sure you taste your food before you actually season it. All right. Checking time. How are we doing on time?
6:23.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next course. We've had salad, we've had soup. We'll move on to our dinner plate here. And this will not typically be something that is sitting in front of you when you sit down. It will be served to you. And remember that it will be served from the right. If you're in a situation where you have professionally trained service staff, and most event venues do have, most caterers do have, if you are at a restaurant and you're sitting in a booth and the right side is not available, then chances are it's going to be coming from the left. So just kind of know there might be some variation there. All right, so the dinner plate, once it's served to you, the next set of utensils will be your dinner fork here and your dinner knife. You may or may not even need the dinner spoon, but if you do, it's there for your use. And remember, we're eating from the outside in. So depending on what's on your plate, you might need to cut things up. So we'll just talk very quickly about how to handle your knife and fork. I am right-handed, so I'm going to show you that first, and then I will attempt to show you left-handed as well, and then what to do when you're finished with your meal. So when you hold your knife and fork, and mind you, if you're right-handed, when you hold your knife and fork, you're going to hold your knife with your finger. Let's see if I can do that so you guys can see it. Your finger where the knife blade meets the handle, and put your finger there. Don't try to hold like this. And this is counterintuitive. If you are a foodie and you cook and you have knife skills in the kitchen, this is very different than those skills. You're going to put your finger down here and hold back on the knife handle a little bit, because that gives you the most control of your knife in this situation. Same thing with your fork. Your forefinger is going to go where the base of the tines meet the base of the handle. And you're going to pierce whatever it is that you're cutting. Chances are it's a piece of meat. And you're going to kind of make this sawing motion back and forth until you cut through your meat. Now, we don't put knife blade into tines because it makes incredibly annoying noise. So we're not going to do that. You want to just make sure that you are kind of up against, and when there's nothing on the plate, it makes noise too, but kind of up against, so you've got control of what you're cutting and the utensils you're using to cut with. Now, left-handed people may use the right hand to cut with, use the knife or not. Either way is fine. If you are right-handed, it is permissible to switch back and use your fork in your right hand, or to keep your fork in your left hand when you're eating meat. Either way is fine, whatever is comfortable for you. When we are not using our knife, it gets set here on kind of the top edge, or maybe here if you've got food of the plate, so it's out of the way. What we never do is put dirty utensils back on the table linens that are underneath our plate, because then you'll transfer whatever is on that knife onto those table linens. And in a venue setting, that venues that do a lot of catering business, the way they launder their linens will probably get out any kind of stain that might end up on those linens. But if you are in fine dining establishments or in someone's home, the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim. So you want to take care to be considerate of people's items. So we're going to put your knife here. With your fork, it is permissible to prop, or to prop there when you're not eating, when you're talking, or to prop right side up when you're talking and to be resting. When you are totally finished, everything goes upside down in the center of the plate. You might also see some people will crisscross things. One way is European, one way is American. Either way is fine. The one thing to always remember is that knife blade needs to be facing down, because when this is removed from your left, it's less likely to slide around. So we will get rid of these two things. This is going to go with it because we didn't need it tonight. And what we have left that we haven't talked about are our glasses. Tonight, for this example, I have just a regular water goblet and a wine glass. Chances are, if you are at a large banquet, you'll have a water goblet like this or something similar, and an iced tea goblet as well. You may or may not have a wine glass. You may or may not have a coffee mug that would be sitting here to the outside of your spoons. So kind of depending on what you have, you'll know what you're being served. Suffice it to say, um, your wine glasses are always going to be, or your glasses rather, are always going to be on the right side. Everything liquid will be on that side. So your soup spoons, your liquid, your glasses for whatever, your coffee mug, all of your solids, your fork, your bread knife, everything will be on the left side. So you can kind of remember when you sit down, if you get confused, you can kind of remember where things are supposed to be. The other two pieces, and you won't likely see both of these in one setting, but for tonight, I wanted to go ahead and do both. Anything that was sitting at the top of this place setting, that I'm going to reset real fast. These are for dessert. So if you're being served cake or pie or cheesecake or something, you'll have a dessert fork up here. Ice cream, cobbler, mousse, anything like that that requires a spoon, you'll have a spoon. You won't typically have both of these, but anything that's sitting above your plate is for dessert. And if you've got something above the plate when you sit down, you know you're having dessert, and that's always a good thing. So that's kind of the typical standard place setting. The other thing that I kind of put some things back here, just as a reminder, as we're resetting a little bit. Always remember, you're going to start at the very outer edge. So whatever, if you've got salad that comes out first, you start at the very outer edge with your fork. If you have soup that comes out first, you start at the very outer edge with your soup spoon, and then you work your way in. The other thing I want you to notice is that the blade of the knife is always facing in. And if you had a steak knife here, that would also be a good sign. Your steak knife would actually be sitting here on the very inside. That blade is always going to be facing in as well. And that's to prevent somebody from accidentally cutting themselves as they're picking up the knife. And when we pick the knife up, it's already in the proper placement with that blade facing the inside. So that is the table setting in a nutshell. Questions? I think we're good to go for questions.
Okay. So our first question is from Jamie. She was asking, sorry, I have to scroll up to it. What happens if you don't like the food served in one of the courses?
Oh, that's a great question, Jamie. Thank you. So if you don't like something that is served to you, it's okay not to eat it. And I have taught etiquette to all ages, from little children to, grandmas and grandpas, sometimes with the little children. What I usually tell little ones is, if you move it around a little bit, nobody's going to know that you didn't eat some of it. That's kind of a little kid trick. But it's perfectly okay not to eat something that you don't like. Now, if it's something that you're unfamiliar with, then I would say try it before you decide you don't like it. And then if you don't like it, it's okay. And just simply leave it on the plate. If you don't, you don't need to move it around or touch it or anything.
Okay, so another question from Jamie. She says, oops, I dropped some of my food on my lap table/floor. Now what?
Okay, so this is a great one too. If you drop food on the floor, don't worry about it. If you drop food and it kind of hits your plate, you can scoot it out of the way if you want to. If you drop it and it hits your lap, I live with 3 dogs, and I can tell you what I would do at home is not what I would do in a professional setting. What you want to do is very delicately kind of pick it up and try to move it to a part of your plate that's out of the way. The urge is very strong to just kind of brush it off your lap and onto the floor. That's not really the most appropriate thing to do. But you've got enough room on your dinner plate to kind of move things and set things out of the way. Chances are nobody's going to notice any kind of movement like that. The other thing too, now that I'm talking about that, if you have You have olives in your salad and you get one that still has the pit in it. I almost always get this question, what do you do? And anything like that, that you need to remove from your mouth, an olive pit, a cherry pit, a seed or something that's too big to chew up and swallow. The urge is to do this and spit it out in our napkin. And that's probably what you've done if you've ever had this problem. The problem is with that is it renders your napkin utterly useless at that point. So what you want to do is the same way that item went into your mouth is the way it's going to come out of your mouth. So if you're eating salad and you end up with an olive pit, you're going to spit that olive pit back out onto the fork and put it at the edge of your salad plate and just kind of move on with the meal. It happens and everybody hopefully follows the same rules and no big deal. And chances are nobody's going to notice it anyway because everybody's kind of in this eating motion anyway. I could tell you guys stories, so many stories.
Thank you. Sure. Our next question is, what happens if someone takes your glass thinking it is their glass?
So I've actually had that happen a few times. And I will tell you what I did, and I did this for a very specific reason. I sat down at a convention, and usually when you're at conventions or banquets, you've got 8 people around a very large round table, and it can be confusing as to whose glass is whose when you sit down and all you have are a few utensils in your glasses and everything's kind of crunched together. I actually had already started drinking out of my glasses when I sat down, and the funnier part to this story is that it was obvious that I had been drinking out of my glass because it was half empty or half full. The person sat down next to me and started to reach with her left hand for my glasses. And I stopped her. And that's perfectly okay to do. And what I said is, I'm sorry, I've already been drinking out of those glasses. You might, try the glasses to your right. It's okay to correct people in that scenario. Now, if you sit down, kind of halfway through a situation where there's already other people at the table and somebody has started off on the wrong foot already, honestly, it's easier just to offset and keep everything going incorrectly. As much as it pains me to say that, because it will at least keep everybody in the right general direction of who's using what pieces, if that makes sense.
Next question from Jamie. What should you do if you need to leave the table to take a phone call or use the bathroom?
Oh, great question. Yeah, see, these are all things that I could demonstrate walking around the dining room. So thank you for asking the questions that I'm not remembering to talk about. So when you need to excuse yourself, the easiest thing to do, and you will want to verbally excuse yourself from the table, and just say, excuse me, I'll be right back. Remove your napkin from your lap and sort of, fold it up a little bit. Once you stand up, you want to put the napkin in your seat. We don't drape it over the back of the seat because it could fall. We don't, lay it back on the table setting. You want to make sure it's in your seat when you leave to go wherever. Again, signal to the server. If the napkin is in the seat, that means I'm returning to my seat, returning to my meal. Don't touch anything, not done eating. However, when you are done eating, your napkin again will be folded. You're going to place it to the left of your table setting. That's a signal to your server that you are finished with your meal, even if there's something still left on your plate, and they can come remove your plate. So if you make this mistake when you're just excusing yourself to use the restroom or take a phone call or something, you'll likely come back to no meal. So, and I've seen that happen more than once in my career. So make sure if you're just leaving for a moment, napkin goes in your seat. If you're totally done, then napkin goes to the left.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question is from Tyler. He was asking, what's the best way to deal with accidentally spilling your drink, whether it spills on you or stays on the linens on the table?
Okay, so I have done this a few times. In fact, I did this not too long ago, someplace I was at, because I was trying to keep my daughter from spilling her drink, and I ended up spilling mine instead. It happens, and it happens to everybody at some point. Don't freak out about it. That's the first thing I will say. If you knock into it and your drink spills away from you, grab your napkin and try your best to prevent the liquid from spreading. Pick the ice back up, put ice back in your glass if that's the case. And chances are your server is going to be paying enough attention that he or she will see that happen. They'll bring you a new glass, they'll bring you fresh linens, a fresh napkin, and clean the mess up. If you spill and it goes onto you, you're going to kind of be doing the same thing. And unfortunately, you may be sitting there with, wet clothes for a little while until things dry off. If you spill and it goes into your dinner plate, again, your server will probably see it happen. If not, call for your server. They'll remove your plate and bring you a fresh one. That's kind of standard. And again, if you spill and everything kind of hits the floor, again, call for your server if they don't see it happen. And they'll actually come clean things up for you if it hits the floor. All of that to say, don't worry about it if it happens, because it may, and it probably will at some point to every one of us. Let your servers do their job. That's what they're there for. Also, if you drop your napkin on the floor, leave it there. If you drop a fork or a spoon or something on the floor, leave it there. Your server, if they don't see it, signal your server, get you linens and.
Okay, next question. Should you stack your dishes to make it easier for the staff to collect?
Oh, how many of us actually do that?
I do.
Yeah, the answer is no, even though it's tempting to do, because I always want to try to help the servers by doing that. And actually, in a restaurant situation, it's a little bit different. If you're going to, Chili's or Applebee's or someplace, different kind of scenario. So if you stack your plates, they're not going to squeal too loudly. If you are in a, venue, a banquet situation, a catered situation, those servers are trained very differently. If you're in a fine dining establishment, a 4 or 5 star restaurant, those servers are trained very differently. In those scenarios, I would say don't move anything unless you're using it purposefully. When you're finished, let things sit. And the reason for that is because there's a very definitive system in the kitchen. So if you start stacking plates up, then that messes with the system of organization in the kitchen behind, back of house. So there are reasons why we leave things lay and let our service staff do the jobs they were hired to do, and that's one of them.
Awesome. Thank you. Our next question is, are there any taboo behaviors at the table, such as using your phone, putting on lipstick, blowing your nose, taking medication?
Okay. So yes and no, and some of those. I'm going to move my napkin. So there is a meme on social media that goes around that is a table setting that has the phone laying. I don't know if you guys can see that. Maybe not. We'll switch so you guys can see that, where my phone is right here. There is no room in a traditional table setting for your phone. So phone stays in your purse, in your pocket, out of the way, on vibrate, on airplane mode, whatever, not on ring mode, in other words. There are some times where we can break those rules, but when you're in a truly professional setting, when you're in a social setting that's a little bit more formal, then the phone needs to stay away from the table. When you're out with your friends, you're out with coworkers, or you're out, once you have your job after graduation, and you're out during the business day, then there are times where we break those rules. But generally speaking, phone stays away. Help me out. I got stuck on the phone. What were the other three? Blowing your nose, I remember. Okay.
Yeah, lipstick,
medication.
your
Thank
nose,
you.
taking medication. Yeah.
Okay. So lipstick and medication need to be done privately. Makeup in general, including chapstick or lip gloss or something, that all needs to be done privately. So if you need to take medication with your meal, either do it before you enter the dining room if you can, or excuse yourself and visit the restroom to do that. And that's just a keep private things private scenario. Same thing with makeup. Don't, whip out your compact, ladies, and reapply the lipstick there. Plenty of women do that. Not something we want to do in a professional setting. With regard to blowing your nose, oddly enough, that is permissible, provided it's just a single blowing of the nose and not a constant situation. But if you eat something spicy and your nose starts to run a little bit because of the spice in the food or something of that nature, if you have a handkerchief or Kleenexes in your purse or pocket, it is permissible to move away from the food and blow your nose. Now, that said, I would not do that this day and age with the pandemic. I would excuse myself. I would probably do that anyway, but excuse myself and go deal with that elsewhere. Just because yeah, not. My cameraman over here says, don't use your cloth napkin to blow your nose in. Very true. So don't do that. And while we're on that topic, don't use your cloth napkin on a hot day to wipe the sweat off of your brow either, because then you've got all of that in your napkin that you don't want to have in your napkin.
Awesome. One of the last questions we have is from Stephen Wright. How would you address someone who is trying to sample your dessert? Also, how would I go about sneezing while eating? Which sounds kind of painful.
It's well, you know what? I think we've all been there too, and sometimes what we eat or too much pepper might cause us to sneeze. The same thing we learned in grade school about using the inside of your elbow to, sneeze. So you turn away and you sneeze. Do that. Allergy season, chances are that's going to happen. And that's okay. Just turn away from your food, sneeze into your elbow. Try not to do one of these numbers and sneeze into your napkin, because again, you render it useless at that point. Try not to sneeze into your hands. So kind of general rule of thumb is your elbow. If somebody tries to sample your dessert, do not stab them with your fork. I have seen that happen. Don't do that. Honestly, if somebody is inconsiderate enough to try to steal your dessert without your permission, that would make me think twice about that person, but you can simply stop them. Just use your words and stop them. Now, that said, when we're eating in our homes or we're with friends in a restaurant, we have a tendency to share food. And in a professional setting, that's not appropriate for a couple of reasons. You don't always know the people around you. So, sharing of food is typically something you do with your friends and family. But even if you do know the people around you, it gets very messy. So if your coworker doesn't like tomatoes, then they need to move the tomatoes off of the salad to the side and not pick up the salad plate and scooch the tomatoes off onto your salad. So kind of stay away from that whole scenario in a professional setting.
Great. I had one last question for you from Strasburg. Are there any rules about sitting down and getting up? Do you have to approach a certain side of the chair?
Not necessarily. And I mean, there's no sit down from the right and stand up from the left scenario. Now, in Queen Victoria days in the 1800s, that was the case. Etiquette has changed so much now that it's not anymore. What you might have happen is, depending on the crowd of people you're with, and ladies specifically, when you stand up to excuse yourself from the table, you might have gentlemen still in the room at the table with you that will stand up as well. And that is kind of a generational etiquette thing that I still see. So don't be, disconcerted if that happens at your table. If you've got somebody that's, in the older than 50 years old range, that very well might happen. So don't let that catch you off guard, ladies, if it does. The other thing along those same lines, for our young men who are watching, trained servers will serve ladies first and then go back around the table and serve all of the men. So if you're sitting in between two women, you'll probably get skipped on that first round, because they're going to serve the women first and then go back around the table and serve the men second. And that's just kind of an old etiquette hangover, really, but I still see it frequently.
Okay, so before we go, I would like to mention that for those of you who have joined, you have an opportunity to get a free meal, free drink, and a possibly free cookie, I believe, at McAllister's. All you have to do is take a photo or draw a photo of a dinner plate setting, and Nikki will be the judge, and whoever has the most accurate table place setting or most impressive will win that prize. And all you have to do is post it in the comments under the SIU Career Development Center Facebook page under the event picture, or you can go to their Instagram page at SIU Careers and tag them. And if you feel free to do a hashtag of mind your manners, and have a great night.
And then there were 4.